Good evening, this is John Milburn for Property 13001. Well, it's our first night. I'm the only one here, so I'll address you for a little while. Hopefully you can watch this recorded session, and with any luck, we'll see you next week. So Monday, 7 p.m. Queensland time, please click the link for Zoom and join us live. All right, so the first thing I'll do is just show you something about the Moodle site. I'll share the screen. The Moodle site should look pretty familiar to you. A couple of things that I do that other unit coordinators may not do. The first is that I try to keep the amount of information on the Moodle site fairly light and catalogued. So initially you'll see the welcome for note from me, advertisement for UCrew and my desire that our online discussions go through UCrew, Zoom, well, which is where we are right now, and a note that commencing on the 5th of March 2018, we'll be meeting at 7 p.m. and the link for Zoom is here. So I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, but below Zoom, you'll see Zoom Property 13001. Click that link and you should come through to me. Now, given that no one is here, something may have gone wrong, and I apologise if that's the case. We'll sort it out. All right. Below that, we have the video for the first week. This is a brand new course, a brand new unit rather. So I'm developing the materials as we go. And I've made a note to that effect. So in terms of latest information, you'll see the latest videos. This is where by the time you see this video, there'll be a copy of it available here. And I include these weekly videos in the weekly session as well. So I'll rotate the videos on the latest information page for you to look at each time. Now there are two links to assessments. The first is here below the latest materials, and the other is in the top left-hand corner in the assessment block itself. Now my Moodle screen will look a little different to yours because as the unit coordinator I get to turn editing on and do some background work and things of that nature, but essentially yours should look the same. So you can link through to the assessments either through the top left-hand corner or the link below. Now what you'll notice is that there's no material. I haven't populated that. That will happen in the next week or two for the first assessment. The first assessment is due on the 3rd of May 2018 at 11:45 p.m. It is worth 50% of the overall mark for the subject, and once you've completed the task, you will upload the submission through Moodle. Now on my screen it says view submissions, on yours it will give you an opportunity to upload the submission. A couple of things about that. The first is that when you complete the work, do so in a single Word document, preferably not PDF. I'd like it in Word. I can do some background searches and other functions quite easily if it's in Word format. Second is, please submit your work on time. I appreciate you don't have the assessment yet, but you will do in plenty of time to complete the assessment and upload it by the 3rd of May. If you happen to be late, don't stress. You will lose 5% per day for each day of late submission, subject to the final submission date. The cutoff date will be the Saturday that follows the Thursday that it's due, so Saturday week rather. So 9 days after the submission is due will be the cutoff. So in this instance, Saturday the 12th of May 2018 at 11:45 p.m. will be your last opportunity to submit work for that assessment. If you don't, then it will be a nil mark, which effectively means that you won't be able to pass the subject. So if you find yourself in trouble, you don't have much to offer, at least submit something and do it as quickly as you can. All right, and once you've submitted the work, you submit it through Moodle. That should be a familiar process for most of you, I should think. Okay, so back to the Moodle page. You should see the Moodle page. I'll just check to ensure that that is the case. If I had someone here live, I'd say, please check the share for me to make sure I've got it on the right page. I'll just stop the share because something didn't quite look right there. I'll try this again. All right, hopefully you're seeing the Moodle page. Doesn't quite look right, but hopefully you are. So when we go back to the assessment block, you'll see the second assessment is a 2-hour invigilated examination. Note it's 2 hours, it's not 3. It's worth 50%, and you will sit that during the examination block. Now, I don't know the date yet. When it's an invigilated examination, it goes through the centralised process, and we will find out later in the unit, but I don't know what that is just yet. That is the specific date. At the moment, it's a very small cohort, only 23 participating in this unit at the moment. Let's go back to the landing page, as I call it, for Property 13001, Property Development. Looking down the page below the assessment block, below the assessments, you'll see the weekly topics, and you can collapse these or expand them. So let's expand additional resources, which is above the weekly topics rather, and you'll see some information that specifically relates to the assessment regime, some information that will help you in terms of writing your assessment and dealing with exam preparation. I have also produced a number of videos about legal research, environmental law videos, and some links that I hope you find useful to Queensland planning laws, regulations, information about specialist searches, websites, and I have prepared a series of environmental law videos dealing with international environmental law, Commonwealth environmental law, and the EPBCA, which is of course the flagship Commonwealth piece of legislation in relation to environmental issues. So I would ask that you please work your way through those additional resources, and I trust that you'll find that valuable. So each week, commencing week 1, Introduction to Property Development, we will deal with various issues. So you'll see that I have prepared the formal lecture, which is available for you to view. This tutorial lecture will be added to that page, as well as added to the latest information. So you'll see the video there, week 1, Introduction to Property Development, is exactly the same video as the one that's that we have a link to in week 1. There is the reading for the week, the study guide, and from time to time I will provide you with problems, information that's important, or further resources. Most of those resources and information this week are really captured in the more generic additional resources that you see above. Because this is a brand new unit, I will be populating the material as we go, as well as providing you with the units. On the left-hand side, just to give you an idea of me, you'll see some of the units that I have coordinated or taught, mostly in the law school. So trusts, introduction to law, statutory interpretation. Relevant to this course, environmental law, I completed that unit just recently. For other schools within the CQU, I've completed related courses, units, law and the environment, and planning and environment law. This unit is effectively what spins off from planning and environment law. So that subject, 19038, no longer exists. It's replaced effectively with this property development subject. Given my background as a barrister and academic, it will come as no surprise to you that the main emphasis from my perspective in this unit will be on the legal aspects of planning law and environmental law, but it's a property development course. So we will be covering much more than that. It's just the other areas are not my strong point in terms of dealing with statistics and finance, etc. But we will get through that as a complete course. So the focus for me in this subject will be on those who wish to practice in property development, or at least deal with those that are involved in property development. So it's a very practical course. That's the aim, and I want you to work on that basis. The material that I've set by way of prescribed and supplementary material is extensive. I make no apology for that. The text, of course, is this publication, which I think is excellent. Property development is widely used throughout universities and colleges. It's a publication from the United Kingdom, but subject to the local changes, is very effective publication. Now, I'll just run through some of the others. I don't necessarily expect you to go out and buy all these, or if you do, you can perhaps look for some of the earlier editions where relevant. One of the Bibles in environmental law is Bates. So that's Environmental Law in Australia by Jerry Bates. That's the 9th edition. It's a pretty meaty text book, but I've got the 8th as well, and there's not a lot of changes between the 8th and the 9th. Now, if you decide that you're buying the 8th edition, then let me know, and I can provide you with a conversion chart that will convert the information in 8 and 9, so you can cross-reference more readily. Okay, other material. This is really valuable. This is the Annotated Civil Liability Legislation in Queensland. Now, when you're being a property developer, the last thing you want to do is be involved in litigation. So the idea of prescribing this as a supplementary text is that it deals with civil liability legislation in Queensland generally, and it deals with all sorts of issues that relate to civil liability for harm and damages. More specifically, more tailored, I guess, directly for this course as a supplementary text is Australian Property Investment and Finance by Roland. It's a very good text. It deals with cash flow analysis. It provides information about return, methods of forecasting, cash flow analysis. So if you're going to be practicing in property development, that's the sort of text which is very valuable. Then for most of you, I suspect that you've done property law, real property law. If you're looking for a simple, a textbook that is simply written, that explains complicated matters quite well, have a look at this one. So Understanding Real Property Law. It's a modest sized text, so it's easily digestible, and it provides you with a good background in terms of real property, tenure, native title, etc. There are others that I could recommend for you to consider, but that'll be plenty. All right, so it'll come as no surprise to you that what we are doing in this unit is covering the material which is in your text, and we'll be covering that simply week by week. So this week, property development is week 1, and it's the introduction. Have a look at my video, read the study guide, read the text, and please do try to stay a week ahead in terms of your material. And we'll be working our way through each of the issues. In terms of the examination, I do give hints from time to time, and I guess the first one that I'll give you is this, that given that my strength is in the legal aspects of property development, you can probably expect that there will be a disproportionately high level of assessment that relates to the legal issues. So the chapters that you'd really want to concentrate upon would be number 2, land for development, number 3, appraisal and risk, which goes to due diligence. It goes to a lot of issues that are legal in nature. I would look development finance, not as much, but still very much a lot of law involved in that. Number 6, planning, definitely. There'll be a big focus on planning in this unit. Construction is also very important, so there could be something there. And number 11, sustainable development. So if you had to read some chapters particularly carefully, read those, although I'm going to reserve the right to provide you with assessment questions from anywhere within the unit, and don't take my hint as meaning that what I have said will be exclusively in the examination. It won't. Okay, let's have a look at some resources online. For those of you that have studied some legal aspects, some of this may be fairly basic, but I think it's important that you know where to look in terms of accessing up-to-date materials and obtaining materials which are delivered to you, if you wish, on a daily or weekly balance into your inbox. So again, let's share the screen and have a look at some of the important websites. Oh, sorry, I will just, before I do that, while I've still got this Moodle page, let me just show you through to UCrew. So our class discussions are in UCrew. many of you who have used Moodle in the past will be looking for the forums. Look, I'll just click on that to show you that there's basically nothing there. So in the forums, I've got the news forum, which will give me a chance to announce things, but the general discussion and the question and answer, I've hidden them, so you won't be able to find them. In case you're looking for them, everything that we do in terms of a discussion will be through uCrew. Well, how do you get to uCrew, and what is uCrew all about? Well, it's pretty simple. You just click the link to the class discussion. If you do that, what will come up is this page. So you can see that we have 23 in the unit, and at this stage we have 10 group members who are enrolled, registered if you like, in uCrew. And you go into this link here, discussion, and you'll see that I've just posted a link a day ago saying welcome, and here's the link to the first lecture. And you can write a new comment, you can post new material, you can add something in here. If you find something you like, if you want to ask a question, if you want to add something, please do all those things through uCrew. Now, some of you might be tempted to send me an email, and that's fine, but don't be surprised at all if I respond to the email, perhaps answer the question, and then invite you to re-ask the question through uCrew. The idea of uCrew in that sense is to enable all of us to share information. So if I provide you with an answer that you find useful, it seems to me that everyone in the unit should be able to share in that. Likewise, if you have a question, odds are that somebody else will have that same question, and your colleagues may be able to answer the question better than I can. So I like to think of it as a collaborative approach where we share information, and the way we do that is through uCrew. Let's share the screen again. There's a few other things that I want to show you before we wrap up for this evening. Okay, so we've looked at uCrew. In terms of this website, no questions asked. You don't ask questions here, but you will upload your assessment work, and from time to time there may be weekly problems. Okay, let's accessing materials, legislation and case law. Let's have a look firstly at the federal government. The Federal Register of Legislation, called the Legislation Register. This is the current version of how to find authorised materials for the Commonwealth. So it's www.legislation.gov.au. I'm sure there's a link to this on Moodle that I've put in there, and you'll find lots of information that is useful. If you're going into it to have just a browse, have a look at Acts in Force. The main act for Commonwealth would be the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act, the EPBCA. You'll also be interested in bills as introduced and legislative instruments in force. So acts, legislative instruments, bills, they're probably the main ones that you want to have a look at. In terms of Queensland legislation, the authorised site is Queensland Legislation, www.legislation.qld.gov.au. This is a revised website. It is excellent. You can find lots of information. Legislation, of course, in-force legislation. You can look at the acts as they were passed originally. I'm big on looking at the bills. So if you look at bills and you look at by title, say let's go to the Planning Act, which would be here. You can see the Planning Bill 2015. And from that, you can look at the legislative history, for example. And once you go into the legislative history, it will take you down to the bottom of the page. Once my computer catches up, and you can find the Explanatory Memorandum. Now, a lot of people don't look at the Explanatory Memorandum or the Explanatory Notes. These are really important resources because it helps to explain what the legislation is all about. So if you're struggling to find out meaning for a section of the Planning Act, for example, have a look at the explanatory note and it will explain the reason that the section has been introduced into the Act at the time that it was introduced as a bill. So a very useful resource there. Austlii, terrific website. Again, it's revised. It has a terrific note up function. A couple of places you can look. So if you go to, say, Queensland Legislation, then you'll find the Consolidated Acts, you'll find the bills and the explanatory notes here as well. And if you go into the Acts, you can find an area where there is a note up function on the right hand side. I won't do that now, but that's something for you to investigate. Next one is surprisingly overlooked, and I don't know why people don't use it far more often. This is Jade. Jade is excellent. Jade.io. It's part of Barnet. It's unauthorized, but it's very popular. It does incorporate an authorized report research guide, and you can obtain daily subscription updates. You can register for this, and if you're interested in a particular area of practice, in legal practice that is, you will find material sent to your inbox as you go day by day. Another place to look, keep in mind, is court websites. Court websites can be a terrific resource for people involved in property development. There's a little extra bonus. So if you go down here, search civil files, what you can do is search the parties, and for example, if you want to search here, say Cairns, just firing up, it will give you all the litigation involved in, say, the Cairns City Council. All right, that's taking a while, but I'll show you some examples of what we do after that stage. So towards the end, I'll just show you a couple of things. The Planning and Environment Court is where much of our litigation will occur. If we're involved in property development, we have problems, you'll possibly end up in the Development Tribunal, but more than likely the Planning and Environment Court. I'm just showing that there are things called practice directions. So if you're involved in that litigation, you need to know practice directions. Now, when you're presenting your work in this unit, you need to reference your material. I'm really strong on referencing your material. So if you have referenced your material, if you have sourced your material from somewhere, then please reference it so that I know that you have acknowledged the original source. And the way that we reference in this unit is by using the Australian Guide to Legal Citations. It's essentially footnote referencing, and it's really quite simple in that we should all know immediately how to insert a footnote without actually typing it into the to the footer. You should be able to go to insert footnote, and that's a really simple thing to do. I'll show you that shortly. So footnote referencing is what we use, and the mechanism by which we reference our material is the Australian Guide to Legal Citations. So there is some information on the Moodle website in relation to it. I'll just share the screen again, and you'll see that that's the TC Byrne School of Law Guide to Citation of Sources. And some more material for Queensland Government. I'll get to that shortly. So when you're referencing your material, you should have a look at the AGLC, and there's a quick guide how to do it. Another way to learn how to reference material in accordance with the AGLC is have a look at your textbook. There is actually, no, this textbook doesn't. It uses Harvard-style referencing. But if you have, for example, almost every legal textbook will have the method of footnote referencing. So I've just selected a page from Bates at random, and you'll see that basically half the page is footnote referencing. That's the sort of thing that I'm talking about. All right, so let's talk now briefly about the textbook that you've got. and some of the materials that you have in that textbook are excellent. I'll share the screen because I've extracted the tables, and I think that looking at the tables is a great way to understand how to navigate through the text. So you'll see tables, examples, figures. Have a look at those, try and work them out and work through those, and quite possibly you'll find those to be a greater resource than the text itself. Obviously the two have to work in conjunction with each other, but those will provide you with a very practical flavour to the material that we're studying in this unit. A couple more things before we go. Oh yes, the reason I had the legislation website up was I wanted to show you some of the key legislation. So in Queensland, the Planning Act, we looked at the Planning Bill previously, but the Planning Act is 2016. It replaces the Sustainable Planning Act from 2009, which in turn replaced the Integrated Planning Act. And then if we go back further, it was the Local Government Act. So the Planning Act 2016 is the key piece of Queensland legislation that deals with planning issues, unsurprisingly. So you'll need to know this piece of legislation because when it comes to dealing with property development, what we're really looking to do is develop property in such a way as to maximise its use and its value. And to do that, you need to have a good grounding in planning law. And that is the starting point to look at the Planning Act. Other than that, you would want to look at the Planning and Environment Court Act, which deals with the litigation associated inevitably with many pieces of property development. So if you're going to be a property developer or advise people that are involved in property development, you need to alert them to the fact that it's going to be very expensive, it's going to be risky, it's going to take a lot of time, there will be many contingencies, and one of those main contingencies is dealing with litigation. The litigation may be against the council if you're a property developer, or it might be against objectors. Again, if you're a property developer, if you're advising a council, it may be responding to litigation where the developer has taken you to task, either because you refused a development or you approved a development on conditions that the developer did not like, or it might be to do with enforcement. So as a property developer, be aware that once you complete a project, you may still find yourself being subject to enforcement proceedings, typically at the hands of the council. And that would normally take place in the Planning and Environment Court. Okay, now I mentioned before in the court's website, you can find information that is particularly relevant and useful for property development matters. If I share the screen, I'll give you an idea of what I'm talking about. So you recall that I showed you the civil search files. If you go into one, and here's one called Byrne Brothers against Fraser Coast Regional Council, it will actually give you access to the documents that were filed in the court proceedings, and that's a great way to learn the process. So this particular case related to enforcement proceedings in relation to development conditions. Another one is Fraser Coast Regional Council against Walter Elliott Holdings, and it deals with leave to appeal to the Court of Appeal, again in relation to property development. So if you're going to be involved in property development, you need to be willing to be involved in litigation. And again, that's the Queensland Legislation website and OSLI. Okay, so that's all that I propose to deal with tonight. I'll stop the share. Sorry we didn't have anyone here. I know that someone was here waiting probably an hour before I clicked on, and I was so disappointed they didn't stay on the line. If you're viewing this now, it means that at least you've been able to see what I had planned to talk with you interactively tonight. Next week, let's hope we have some people online and we can get some discussions going. In the meantime, discussions through UCrew, or feel free to send me an email as we go. All the best, and we will see you during the week and next week. Thank you.